There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Holberg moving to amend Senate File 1770, the third engrossment as amended as follows. The amendment is coded A3.
The member from Dakota, Representative Holberg.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members, and I'm going to ask the body to indulge me a little bit this afternoon. I've got to give you a little background on this issue, and I'm going to be working off of 3 documents today, and one of them was passed out. It is page 1. It has Holberg on the top. I also sent it out electronically. Then you also, of course, have the amendments, the A3 amendment and the A4 amendment. And what we're going to be talking about today is something pretty important. And it's an emerging issue, and it's something that I believe that policymakers should make the decisions regarding. And that is, what is the government going to do with the information that it collects on its citizens? I found out early this year, I was approached by some people that purchase motor vehicle and driver's license records, that in December of last year, the Department of Public Safety sent out a letter and said, we'll no longer be selling data in bulk. We're going to charge you $5 a record. Well, this was a complete change in business model, and also unlike how any other state did this. Now, none of us really like the information about us as being sold and used, but what you have to know is that's not really the issue before us today. The federal government regulates how motor vehicle and driver's license records can be used and accessed. And we have to comply with those standards. And in order to change those things, there's probably some of them that are just beyond our reach. But what we do have control of is the business model and how this works. And so I was a little alarmed at what was happening and did some more checking and found out, as we all know, the Department of Motor Vehicle Services, every single transaction that they conduct, we as the legislature set the fee and the cost for that. Not unlike the DNR, the PCA, other departments. And so because the only per record fee they had available to them contemplated a paper record one at a time was $5 per record. And there wasn't really in there authorizing language, the authorization to sell bulk data, nor a rate in their statute. So we decided to go to work on this, and for quite a while, the department was under the belief that they didn't need any legislation, that they could just do this on their own, and that would be fine. The changes in costs would be about 600% by some estimates. And why is this information important? Well, it provides for our product or vehicle recalls, Amber Alerts, checking driver's license status in order to get insurance, a variety of uses that are important to public safety and other functions. So as we tried to work on this bill, there was a very strong message from the governor's office that the governor wanted to charge a market rate for this information, and that they wanted the latitude to do this and implement it on their own without direction from the legislature. Well, members, that's very problematic in the context of what our job, in my belief, is. We're the ones that set the costs, and we're the ones that should set the policy. This move to charge a market rate for bulk data will not only have implications in this department, but across the state system. And again, I believe that we as legislators should be the ones that should set that policy. And so we tried to work, for some of those of you that were in either the Transportation Finance Committee or the Civil Law Committee, we had some quite contentious hearings. There was a lot of unhappiness, words flying. Chair Lesch laid the bill over. People went out in the hallway and yelled and screamed at each other. We came back 2 days later. We thought we had kumbaya. People were nodding their head. They were going to work on it. Things are going good. Went to Transportation Finance, thought we were still working on it, found out the department was trying to kill the bill again. The commissioner had a conversation with Chair Hornstein and myself where we all committed to continue to work on this. I made the commitment that I would not bring the amendment to the House floor unless there was agreement, and that we would continue to move forward. Less than 24 hours later in the Senate, on second deadline, the department went into the Senate Judiciary Committee, testified vehemently against the Senate companion to my bill, and killed the bill in the Senate. And seemed somewhat oblivious to the fact that if you make a commitment to continue on work on something, that it maybe isn't good form to less than 24 hours later go to the other body and kill the companion to the House file. So we continued to work and pass language back and forth, and knowing that this bill was coming up, and unfortunately we didn't have an omnibus data practices bill this year, nor a data practices subcommittee working group, so some of our options were limited given that we didn't have a Senate file that was moving. So we talked about this bill as a potential vehicle. So I continued to work in good faith trying to get information from the department. I sent them the language that you see in the A4 amendment in almost exact form yesterday at 12:20. Fully aware that I had informed them that I would put the A3 amendment in, which was the bill as it left committee, and that we would work on an amendment to the amendment to submit by 6. That was at 12:20 yesterday. Never heard anything. So before 6, I did my best bet to put the A4 amendment together and submit it to meet the pre-filing deadline. At 8:20 this morning, I finally heard back from the governor's office that not only did they oppose my language, but that they expected me to honor my commitment to not bring the amendment to the House floor today. And I said I would honor that agreement. In the meantime, I discovered, and that's where the document that I emailed out and was also passed on the floor comes into play. And this is the amendment, or the document with the page 1 up on the top. I found out that what was happening was that the governor's office had put together this amendment, 4 or 5 pages, I guess it is, and was going to slip it into the Omnibus supplemental spending bill conference committee in the process. Now, members, we have a rule, a joint rule, that you're not supposed to put language into conference committee that hasn't passed each body. But this is really one of the most obscene examples of abuse of this that I've ever witnessed in 16 years. If you look at the policy considerations that are in this, and I delineated some of them for you with notes that are contained in this thing they were just going to slip into a conference committee, you can see that they're going to raise all this money. Some of the extra money is going to go to MinIT. Now, Chair Murphy, I don't believe you've ever heard this language in your committee, but we have 2 sentences to say how MinIT is going to use this additional money for securing and protecting data stored and transmitted by the state system. No priorities, no accounting. Oh, by the way, there's never been a fiscal note on this either, so we don't want to bother with that. If you see on the bottom of the page, this is where it gets really concerning to people that me that care about policy, is we're going to allow the commissioner to establish a market rate for buying data with no oversight from the legislature. Now, we sell this data all across the state systems, and I, for one, believe that if we are going to embark on a policy of selling data at a market rate, that we, the legislature, should make the decision if we're going to do that, if so, what we should charge, and how the money should be used. Now, there's lots of good reasons why maybe you might want to charge a bulk rate. Are there reasons why you might not? But maybe, just maybe, dumping money into MinIT with no standards might not be the best solution. But again, when you see what they are trying to do, you wouldn't have had any say in that. Some states have ombudsman's office for privacy where citizens can have an advocate on their behalf to protect their information. That might be a good idea. But did we get a chance to discuss and talk about it? No, because we're going to put a 5-page amendment in a bill in a conference committee that's never been heard in either body, that contains all kinds of policy. And so I was quite concerned and actually really frustrated. As you go through the pages, here's another good part of it, not really, that I've been talking about for 4 months. And that has to do with the audit function of this service. Now, you'd have to have been living under a rock for the last 4 years in this state to not be aware of all the problems with the motor vehicle and driver's license database and the unauthorized access in this state. Now, we have a really unique situation here where under one umbrella, they collect the data that populates the database, they sell it, and they also supervise the users, law enforcement, the major users of this as well. Now in this bill, guess who's going to audit the system and its effectiveness? The Commissioner of Public Safety. That's a great idea. That's an arm's length away from this, isn't it? I disagree. And finally, and why we knew this was going to happen, at least I knew this was going to happen, at the very bottom of the page, we have our first agenda for the new Data Practices Commission, where 3 meetings are going to be used to discuss this one issue. Now, the Data Practices Commission that recently passed, and I'm proud of that, when I spoke to the Speaker to get support for it, I didn't want it to be a big financial burden, and I assured him that we'd probably meet maybe 6-8 times before the end of the year, because we didn't have a lot of money, but we could get started, right? Well, in this bill, would say that half of those meetings would be spent on this one issue. So, members, to the Speaker's credit, and I'm going to say that again, to the Speaker's credit, and I am grateful for this, he came and talked to me about this issue this morning and asked me what was going on, and I explained my dismay. And he followed through and decided that he would stop putting this language that the governor wants into the supplemental spending conference committee report. So for now, I think we can set this document aside, but I hope that I have illustrated for you all the problems and how at every turn decisions that should be made by us, the legislature, were taken away from us in the attempt to subvert the process. So let's talk about the A3 amendment. The A3 amendment basically allows for the status quo. What it does is it allows them to sell in bulk form at the rate of fees that they were taking in now, and it kind of calls a timeout. It gives them their comfort language for doing what they're doing now that they weren't sure they had the authority to do, but it holds off the subscription service and market rate prices and lets them continue with some comfort language, which would allow the legislature to, in the next session, look at this issue and decide whether or not they wanted to move forward in some of the proposals proposed by the governor's office. So then that brings us to the A4 amendment, and this is the amendment that I was unable to get any feedback from recently in the governor's office, but is my best attempt to address the concerns of the department, the purchasers of this data, and the needs of the public in having accountability in this process. And I'll go through it very briefly, but there's some very important changes from what I think is a good idea versus what the governor's office wants to do. First of all, the extra money that would be raised would go, and audits would be conducted by the legislative auditor. The legislative auditor has reviewed this language and has no problem with it, and in fact had the opportunity to speak with Mr. Mossman in the governor's office to explain to them that this was just what the legislative auditor's office does. And while they don't want new undue burdens because there is additional money being raised in this amendment, part of it would go to them to support the cost. So the audit of the use, functionality, and security of this system would be done by somebody who's an arm's length away from it. I think that's a good idea. The A4 amendment would also allow for them to implement some increase in costs to the users. And the users are okay with this. They don't particularly like it, but they can live with it. And using information provided by the department, I tried to most closely monitor or reflect what they wanted to charge in their proposals, more of a per cost type of fee, not going to this let's make money fee, but rather a cost of delivery and a little bit more so we could do some auditing and some additional work in this area. And so that's what you have before you in the A4 amendment. Members, I'd like at this point to move the A4 amendment.
There's an amendment to the amendment. The clerk will report the amendment.
Holberg moving to amend her amendment to Senate File 1770 as follows. The amendment is coded A4.
Representative Holberg.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. And so what we have today before us now with the A4 amendment is we have two choices. And I'm going to ask for a roll call vote on the A4 amendment.
Representative Holberg requests a roll call. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call.
My purpose today is to establish a House position in this policy area. And quite frankly, I don't care how you vote on the A4 amendment. It's up to you. This is my best shot at trying to address some of the concerns of the governor's office. But quite frankly, this language should have went to Representative Murphy's committee. It should have went to Representative Hornstein's committee. It should have went, as much pleasure it would have been to go to Chair Lesch's committee. And I think there'd probably be a state government operations stop as well. So, members, if today on the House floor you like the A4 amendment, you think that's a great idea, and you want that to be what we move forward into conference committee, support the A4 amendment. If you say let's keep things the way they are, suggest that the department come back next year, work through the process with a bill that can go to all those committees. And as much as I like all you chairs over there, I'm hoping that maybe there might be some different chairs next year to go through those committees. But to go through the process and have the discussion, set a policy for bulk data sales on the statewide system. How are we going to handle this? How is the money going to be used? Do not allow, please do not allow the administration to begin setting fees in policy without the legislature having the opportunity to do their work. And with that, Madam Speaker, I'd be happy to stand for any questions you have.
Discussion on the amendment to the amendment. Representative Lesch.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. With all due respect to the amount of work that Representative Holberg has done in order to accommodate the differing sides on this issue, I would ask for a no vote on the amendment to the amendment. For this reason, it has not been reviewed in the committees that Representative Holberg had talked about. I remain a little confused as to actually what it does and how it would work. And how it operates. And I think, as Representative Holberg had stated, that there may be an opportunity next year to come back and do that. It was Representative Holberg's best effort, and she should receive credit for trying to work on that in anticipation of what the administration would want. However, considering that this one-time humble Timber J bill has turned into a Minnesota Health Plans bill and a Department of Public Safety bulk data sale bill, I think it's complicated enough already. So I'd ask folks to vote no.
Further discussion. The member from Dakota, Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I rise in support of the amendment. I want to, oftentimes when we have legislative auditor language in front of us, I'll speak and say that the auditor hasn't reviewed this, or we shouldn't be directing the auditor, but the auditors back in the retiring room, I've checked with them. This has been vetted with the legislative auditor. Thank you, Representative Holberg, for doing that, and I think it provides some of that independent checks and balances on that without interfering with our normal process. It is an authority question rather than a direction question. So with that, I support it.
Further discussion. The member from St. Louis, Representative Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Holberg, What state agency would, is it just the Department of Public Safety that would, the A4 would be reported to or accountable for? Would the things that are in A4 be just from and about public safety?
Representative Holberg.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and Chair Murphy. The revenue that would be raised as a result of the increased fees in this bill would be split. There would be additional money that would go to the Department of Public Safety to implement the new subscription service, and there would also be money that would go to the legislative auditor in order to conduct the independent audits of the bulk data users and the system.
Representative Murphy. Further discussion? Seeing none, the clerk will take the roll on the amendment to the amendment. The clerk will close the roll. Representative Franson votes no. There being 106 ayes and 21 nays, the motion prevails. The amendment to the amendment is adopted. On the Holberg amendment, Representative Holberg.
Madam Speaker, I just stand for questions and encourage a green vote.
Any discussion on the Holberg A3 as amended?
Is there a roll call on that?
Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, please say no. The motion prevails. The amendment is adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Abler moving to amend Senate File 1770, the third engrossment, as amended as follows. The amendment is coded 304.
The member from Anoka, Representative Abler.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. I'm trying to create a data omnibus bill, and I think that here's our chance. The topic of Common Core has been discussed in many places across this country, and in Minnesota, although not at all at the legislature, which is one of those ironies, kind of like the MNsure discussion, Madam Speaker. A lot of people talk about it, can't quite get it brought up here. This actually is a bill. I don't remember the House file number, but I introduced it early in session, asked for a hearing on this topic, and I was not offered that opportunity. Other business was coming, and we're so busy, I can't get everything in, Madam Speaker. It's just hard to work it in. And so Common Core it's a great idea in theory, kind of like communism in theory, where those who have give and those who need get, and it all works out like your fourth grade discussion about the theory of communism. And it's the same idea here. If we had a way to measure all the states across each other, to know how Alaska compares to Arkansas, compares to Oklahoma, compares to Mississippi, wouldn't it be great? So then people could measure and they would know that someone's better and someone's worse. So it works out great maybe Unless you're Minnesota, where you're at the top of the pack. And the threat of some of those standardization may lower some of our benefits that some of the qualities that we've come to realize. And until you realize, as you listen to how it's been implemented across the country, that some of these great ideas that are brought forward by the National Governors Association and other national-based groups are actually totally messing up some of the school programs in places. And so, Madam Speaker, what I attempted to do was to get, and there was a lot of discussion, a lot of, is it true or not? And in Minnesota, we're not really too burdened by this yet. We did accept the Common Core English curriculum some years ago, and we rejected the math curriculum because ours was better. But I do want to warn people about something that's coming as this moves forward. One of the things is that there's agreements and pressures to accept various curriculum choices that Minnesota is on the edge of doing and some other states have already done. The other thing is about data. And this is a data bill, and so there's talk that some of the data about our students actually gets exported beyond Minnesota's borders to people who are interested, the federal government or vendors or people like that. And the last thing I wanted was that if my son is doing badly in math, I'd get an invitation from somebody in New York offering to tell my student a math program. And so I tried to find just the most centrist kind of thing on the bill, and I thought I had struck upon it, but I guess I hadn't because it didn't get heard. But what this amendment would do would be to say that Minnesota gets to control its curriculum just the way it is today. And Minnesota gets to control its data just the way we do it now. So if this amendment and bill would become law, nothing would change. But we'd have a firewall in Minnesota where the data that we have about our students would go to the districts and other districts around us are transferring, and the Minnesota Department of Education within Minnesota's walls. And if anything gets sent out, we couldn't do it. And if anything was about to get sent out, one part of the amendment says that the parents can opt out of that. And so, Madam Speaker and members, Representative Lesch is a good friend of mine. This bill is really not about Common Core, and if there was a motion to challenge its germaneness, he would win. And so, I'm not going to bring it to a vote, although I would like to. Part of the reason I'm not going to bring it to a vote is this topic is not a partisan matter. And if I brought this to a vote, you'd feel inclined to have to say, no, we better support our speaker in her wrong ruling that it's germane, or her right ruling, or whichever. And so the topic would become polarized. And I want to commend Representative Isaacson for being my co-author on this, which I purposely sought out a person of his standing to make this not a partisan matter. But I do want to point out to members, before I take this amendment down and withdraw it, that this topic is very important. And that Minnesota is a leader in this country in its educational prowess. And other states should emulate how we do it. And that some groups that are outside of us should not tell us how we should behave in our education. I ran in 1998 against the profile of learning, which was a good idea at the time. At least it was a state experiment. It didn't go well, and I was happy to see it go. And that was one of our great successes. The trouble, the higher up you go, with these educational great ideas is you can ruin more people. If one district happens to have an idea and they implement it, it only hurts those students of that district, and then they realize, oh, we should stop doing that. When the state does something, you affect all of our districts. When at a federal level, when you begin to step testing up, to coerce all this curriculum going in as it is currently underway, you can affect the entire country. And Madam Speaker, the effort in all these improvements is to help our competition with India and Japan and China, which is the real competition we have to face. Minnesota has already found the answer about how to excel. Anoka Hennepin School District has found the answer on how to deal with the achievement gap. We have the lowest achievement gap in the state, and being funded below average. Because, well, one thing, Madam Speaker, on the tests we do, we have a crazy idea on those tests. We actually use them. And when a student does badly on some math module, they actually say, that kid should learn more math in this module. And so Danny Carlson, who is here on the floor, retiring this year as well, has led that, and I'm so proud of it. But I wanted, in the same way Representative Holberg did her bill, and she actually took it to a vote, I'm not going to do that to stigmatize this topic. This bill needs to be heard in a committee. Not this year anymore, but next year you better look into this. Because we are at risk. I'm telling you, as a person leaving, we are at risk from this very topic about losing some of the freedom, some of the autonomy, and some of the benefits we have come to appreciate as the great state of Minnesota and our marvelous educational prowess, both in terms of content as well as the privacy of our students' data being shared with people that we don't even know, who do not have our students' best interests at heart and not academic interests at all. So, Madam Speaker, this could be a 2-hour discussion. But I'm not doing that to you, and I told the leadership that I was not going to do any damage to my good friend Representative Lesch's bill here. But I needed a data bill to talk about it. Here it is. And so, Madam Speaker, I hope that members have heard my warning, done in earnest and good intent. And so as who's ever in charge next year, we had better talk about this. We better consider the data privacy matters. We better consider our autonomy and preserving our freedom to have our own curriculum. Let Minnesota be the leader that we are, and let our students excel and compete well with India, China, Russia, and Japan, and all those other countries. And Madam Speaker, your indulgence has been marvelous. And so with that, not to draw this any longer, I would like to withdraw the amendment. Thank you.
Representative Abler withdraws his amendment. There's another amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Abler moving to amend Senate File 1770, first engrossment as amended as follows. The amendment is coded 305.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It was not always my intention to withdraw this amendment. This was just for the data part, hoping to get this to be germane in case the first one was ruled not germane. So just a tactic for members, you shrink them down, you might get something through. With that, Madam Speaker, I'll withdraw this amendment. Thank you very much.
Representative Abler withdraws his amendment. There are no further amendments at the desk. The clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, Senate File 1770 as amended.
Third reading as amended. Discussion to the bill. Any further discussion to the bill? The member from Ramsey, Representative Lesch.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. This bill is now a crazy quilt, which has something for everyone. But we will be going to conference on this, so rather than talk you to death anymore, just vote green. Thank you.
The clerk will take the roll on the bill. Davids votes aye. The clerk will close the roll. There being 130 ayes and 0 nays, the bill is passed as amended and its title agreed to. Conference committee reports on House files.
This is the Liebling motion. Conference Committee report on House File 2402, an act relating to state government. The report is addressed to the Honorable Paul Thiessen, Speaker of the House, the Honorable Sandra L. Pappas, President of the Senate. We, the undersigned conferees for House File 2402, report that we've agreed upon the items in dispute and recommend as follows. The report is signed by all 5 conferees on the part of the House and all 5 conferees on the part of the Senate. Liebling moves that the report of the Conference Committee on House File 2402 be adopted and that the bill be repassed as amended by conference.
I recognize the author, Representative Liebling, to explain the Conference Committee report.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. So, members, this is still a bill that will improve health and save lives in Minnesota. And I'm very pleased with the product that we were able to bring back from Conference Committee. And as you heard, it was signed by all the members of the Conference Committee. There are 3 main issues in this long bill that were really disputed between the House and Senate. And I'm just going to go through them very quickly. The first one is the Prescription Monitoring Program, or what we call PMP. And the Board of Pharmacy brought this bill. The program lives within the Board of Pharmacy. The Senate version was basically the whole program and the changes that the Board of Pharmacy was asking for. The House version was much more restrictive. This is a program that uses a lot of sensitive personal data. As we went through our committees, I was very concerned about the use and abuse of data, as many members of this body are. So the versions were very different. We had a very difficult negotiation over this, and what we've come up with is a true compromise, because the Senate doesn't like it, and frankly, I don't really like it that much either. So what we've done is really allow the program to continue to prove its worth, and we're going to keep careful tabs on it to make sure that it does just that. But the issue underlying it is very important, and that is addiction, an issue that we've talked about a lot on this House floor this year. And so if the program does prove its worth, it could be very much worth using personal data to try to impact addiction in the state. And on the other hand, if it doesn't actually impact addiction, we may in the future want to restrict and cut off the program. So that's the PMP. Another issue had to do with the Board of Nursing and the Health Professional Services Program, which is a program that monitors impaired health professionals so that in some cases they can continue to practice with safety. This was, a lot of these changes came from a series of investigative reports that were in the Star Tribune last fall, if you recall, having to do with impaired nurses who had been allowed to continue to practice. And so we made changes in the program responsive to those concerns. Again, we had a difficult negotiation with the Senate, but I am satisfied that we have made the program stronger. We've given the Board of Nursing more tools, and we're requiring more of them to make sure that Minnesotans are protected against potential harm from impaired professionals. Finally, the one that I'd like to talk about is the one that's gotten the most press attention, and that is e-cigarettes. As many of you know, the Senate had a very strong position of adding e-cigarettes to the Clean Indoor Air Act, and many people on this floor wanted to do the same. What we came out with is not that. What we came out with is an expansion from where the House bill was. We are banning e-cigarettes in more places, but importantly, we are not doing that in restaurants and bars. So I know there is a question about how the language is phrased in the conference report, and it's a bit confusing, but we were assured by staff that the language there means that we are not banning e-cigarettes in bars and restaurants. However, we are giving local units of government authority to do that if they so choose, and I would be glad to answer questions about that as well. So before I sit down and take questions, I would just like to thank, first of all, the conferees who really were wonderful, and of course the staff, and I guess I should hold my thank yous till the very, very end. So I will sit down and be glad to take questions.
Discussion on the motion to adopt the conference committee report. Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. The motion prevails. The clerk will give the bill its third reading as amended by conference.
Third reading, House File 2402 is amended by conference.
Third reading as amended by conference. Discussion to the conference committee report. The member from Dakota, Representative Mack.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. Thank you, Representative Liebling, for the work that was put into this. I think that we were able to go in with some strong provisions on the House side, and I'm happy to say that in a lot of the key areas, I think that the House position came out strong, and I was happy for that in many areas, including some of the issues that we had with electronic cigarettes. And I just want to kind of reemphasize what Representative Liebling said, understanding that the language around the amendment and the compromise with the Senate around e-cigarettes and where they would be permissible to be used, that the legislative intent there, and I believe Representative Liebling said this very clearly, so I just want to restate it for those who have questions, that the legislative intent of this language is that private businesses would not be mandated to prohibit the use of electronic cigarettes, and that to do so is not the intent of this legislation. So I just think that's an important point, as questions have been raised about that today. Beyond that issue, members, there's a lot of great policy in here that reflects the work of the committee. I commend Representative Liebling for really moving forward on issues that many of us could agree on, that are good things for the state, that we could all get on board with. And so I was very happy to support the bill in that. And I also am, happy to say I've had members ask me, there's some stuff in here that folks that were concerned about some of the issues with what we were doing with autism and the task force, that we're moving some things forward there that is in the best interest of the advocates and folks that are concerned about how the state is moving forward on issues related to autism. So I'm really happy to see that moving forward and think it's going to be great for those families. So members, I ask for your support on this. It's a great piece of legislation for the state. And thank you, Representative Liebling and the other conferees.
The member from Anoka, Representative Abler.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. And I just want to offer general support to the bill. Anytime there's an omnibus of this nature where it's all policy, which I'm not actually a fan of that, Madam Speaker, there's some things that you really like about it, and there's a few things you might not like about it so much. And so that's the peril people are in. They'll need to vote based upon their own views. But I have a couple of questions for the author, if she would yield, Madam Speaker.
She will yield. Representative Abler.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. And I just want to understand the author's intent about the vaping, where you can do it and where you can't. Can you just give me your best explanation about where the prohibitions are, just so it's clear the author's intent, the legislative intent, and then I might have a question after that, Madam Speaker.
Representative Liebling.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And Representative Abler, I'll do my best. We had a conference committee where I'm pleased to say I didn't write everything and decide everything. And I think we were really a good team in that respect, and we have strong team members who might be able to do this better than I can. But that said, so the section, it's on page 119 of the conference committee report, and it says, first of all, it bans the use of the e-cigarettes in any building owned or operated by the state, home rule charter or statutory city, county, township, school district, or other political subdivision. So that is broader than what left the House floor, which was, I think, just state buildings. Secondly, it bans e-cigarettes in any facility owned by MnSCU or the University of Minnesota. So that was not in the original House bill. Any facility licensed by the Commissioner of Human Services. So we'd be talking about hospitals, nursing homes, those kinds of things. Any facility licensed by the Commissioner of Health, but only if the facility is also subject to federal licensing requirements. Now that's the confusing language I spoke of at the beginning, and that is how, because restaurants are licensed, and restaurants and bars are licensed by the Department of Health, but are not licensed by federal authorities, that is intended to exclude bars and restaurants. And then we have finally that nothing in this subdivision shall prohibit political subdivisions or businesses from adopting more stringent prohibitions on the use of electronic cigarettes or electronic delivery devices. So we have made it very explicit that local units of government and businesses can set their own more restrictive policies. And that, I think that was already the law, actually, but this just makes it explicit.
Representative Abler.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I appreciate that, and it's good to ask a question you know the answer to, just to make sure the author can clarify. And so I think it's clear to me as I vote on this that it's not to include any Minnesota restaurants or bars. But I have a question. So Anoka actually owns a golf course, the Greenhaven. And so because they own Greenhaven and it's a bar, then they would be prohibited from allowing smoking in there, even if it's leased out to somebody else because they own the building. Is that right? If she'll yield again, Madam Speaker.
Representative Liebling.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Abler. Well, I have to say we didn't think about that, but as I'm looking at the language, I would say that would be a place where it would be barred.
Representative Abler.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And just to put a plug in for my own profession, they've been trying to get licensed. So they've tried to fix their license bill for like 4 years, and Representative Mack and Representative Fritz and others have had the long list of people trying to get it done. And so kudos to who was the latest author? Representative Mack? I don't remember even who was the author this time. Whoever got it done, and there's a bunch of other licensing provisions in the bill. Somebody thought there was more licensing in the bill. There's no new credentials in the bill. It's just a lot of updating and kind of technical stuff. So I want to encourage members as they move forward. Representative Fritz, and so I want to encourage members that those are good and that they should probably vote for the bill. And thank you, Representative Fritz, and you maybe want to say something too. Thank you.
The member from Rice, Representative Fritz.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And to that point, Representative Abler, yes, I was the author on that and worked for a number of years on that with you as well. And I thank the committee chair and all the members of the committee for having helped us with that, the chiropractors bill. It's finally done. So for some of the freshmen, it does sometimes take a number of years to complete a task. But I'm very happy that this has finally come to fruition. Thank you.
The member from Wabasha, Representative Drzeskowski.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. We have before us, again, another omnibus bill of government growth that needs to be rejected by this body. It includes more language that tells people in Minnesota what they can't do or what they have to do. It tells us that we can't use a new technology that's emerged in certain ways in certain places, a technology in e-cigarettes that not one person that we are aware of has died from, nor is there demonstrable evidence to show that it is a problem. Yet, fear and the resemblance to other cigarettes, to real cigarettes, has apparently driven this body to include this in the bill and to begin to tell Minnesotans what they can't do around this particular new technology. It displaces, or should I say, supplants parenting in the ability for parents to decide for themselves, for their kids, whether or not they should be in a tanning environment. It increases licensing in a variety of areas, not only daycares, but a variety of areas. Includes new licensing requirements, additional training requirements for those that have licenses. Government Gone Wild continues, members. Please defeat this Government Gone Wild, and let's reestablish the ability for people in a free market, in a free place to be free. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The member from Wright, Representative McDonald.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Will the author yield for a question?
She will yield. Representative McDonald.
Thank you. Representative Liebling, in the e-cigarettes, the vapors, you mentioned that they will not be allowed if this bill passes on campuses, MNSCU campuses. Is that correct?
Representative Liebling.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And Representative McDonald, no, that's not what I said. It's any facility owned by those, by MNSCU or by the university. And by that, I take that to mean buildings, not outdoors.
Representative McDonald.
Would she yield for another question?
She will yield. Representative McDonald.
Representative Liebling, in the buildings, the facilities, would that include dorm rooms on MNSCU properties?
Representative Liebling.
Madam Speaker, Representative McDonald, if that's a facility that is owned by that entity, which some of them are, but now they're often private dorms, if you will, but if it's owned by the University of Minnesota or by MNSCU, yes, it would apply there.
Representative McDonald.
Thank you. Well, there you go again. Trying to ban a new technology, as Representative Drzeskowski said, and we want to encourage students not to smoke. We recognize that the young kids who are free, they're 18, 19, they're out of their house, they want to explore, and they're smoking cigarettes, and we know it's not good for their health, so we have a new technology that allows them not to be addicted to cigarettes in the e-form, e-cigarettes. and vapor, which hurts nobody. And now you're going to say they can't smoke it in their own dormitories and force them to perhaps continue smoking. I think that's a wrong message to send. We're certainly trying to encourage people not to smoke, to get healthy, and now students who are in college can't even have a little vapor cigarette, which is harmless. No evidence to substantiate that it's not. Can't even do it on their own college campuses. And would the author yield for another question?
She will yield. Representative McDonald.
Representative Liebling, would your bill also prohibit any vapors on the Spirit Mountain ski chalet?
Representative Liebling.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And Representative McDonald, well, I'm not familiar with the Spirit Mountain ski chalet, so I think you'll have to tell me, or maybe you can look at the language and see if it fits under one of these categories. I don't know who owns that, so I can't answer your question. However, I do want to say that, Representative Murphy is telling me it's a state-owned property. If it's a state-owned property, then you can't vape in there. But while I have the floor, I'd just like to respond a little bit to some of this, because I think other members will want to talk about this more. But the idea that this is just a safe technology and that it somehow is just a way to stop smoking is really not the case. I mean, the evidence is conflicting, but the problem that we have here is that we need to balance the rights of those who want to use this technology, and we are not banning them from using it in any respect, and we're not imposing the same restrictions as we have for combustible tobacco. However, when you use these items in a public place, you are exposing people who don't want to be breathing it to that vapor. Now, one of the problems with this product is that it can have different things in it. You can buy it from different sources, and there's no standardization of what's in it. So that means that in one case it may be harmless water vapor, but in another case it may be a toxic chemical that's being put out into the air for other people to breathe. You as the user, you as a student in a dorm may want to take the risk of that, but your roommate in that dorm should not have to take that risk along with you if they choose not to. And so we're balancing interests here in an area where the evidence is starting to come in, but we don't really have it. So that's where we find ourselves. Again, a compromise. This is a true compromise. Nobody's really happy with it. Obviously, people who want to vape, many of them will want to use this everywhere. And many people don't want to be breathing it because they don't want to take the risk when they don't know what's in it. So we're in this middle ground. We think as a committee, as a conference committee, we thought we struck about the right note here. And so I'm encouraging members to support this.
The member from Dakota, Representative Halverson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I also feel the need to rise to put to rest some of the messages that we are hearing regarding the safety of electronic cigarettes and also the overreach of the notion of public health. Minnesota is a state that has been a leader in public health over the years. It's led to us being rated very often in national surveys as the healthiest state in the nation. That's not a rating that I'm willing to give up. We have lower than average rates of obesity in the state. We have lower than average rates of smoking in the state. The reasons are because of our strong public health policies. And if you think those policies don't make a difference, let me tell you. Back in 2005, before Minnesota passed a significant increase in the tobacco tax of 75 cents, our smoking rates were about 25% in this state. We passed that increase in the tobacco tax. We know through science that this is a proven policy to keep kids from starting smoking, is to keep the price high. We went on in 2007 to pass a comprehensive Clean Indoor Air Act that was going to protect Minnesotans from breathing secondhand smoke. After we passed that policy, and after other communities passed that policy, guess what happened? In every single instance where these policies were passed, the rates of heart attacks in our state and in other communities that passed comprehensive clean indoor air policies dropped. That's significant public health policies. In fact, that has an impact on our health care costs, which are always a concern to us. So public health policies are important in many, many aspects. In addition, since we passed those smart public health policies to keep smoking out of the hands of kids, since we made investments in helping people access free tools and techniques to help them quit smoking, Minnesota's smoking rates have dropped to 16%. That's almost a 9% smoking decrease in 9 years. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm here to tell you public health policies are effective and they're good for our state. With regard to electronic cigarettes, I'm hearing again the argument that these are safe. Members, it is vital that we do not continue to message that these are safe products. In fact, after we passed our compromise bill this week, another study, one of the largest studies on the safety of e-cigarettes, was issued. And if you go to the journal Circulation, published by the American Heart Association, you will see that they have indeed created one of the largest studies and have determined these are not safe devices. They contain known carcinogens. If you are near somebody who is smoking an electronic cigarette, you will be exposed to known carcinogens, including formaldehyde. If you think that they are harmless and that addicting kids to nicotine is harmless, think again. This study also showed that 20% of middle schoolers who are using e-cigarettes have never smoked a cigarette in their life. They're finding a new pathway to addiction. And the Journal of the American Medical Association has gone on to study that and find out that those kids that are starting using e-cigarettes are moving on to regular tobacco cigarettes. This is not harmless. This is not a cute experiment that we take on in our wild and impetuous youth. People that take on tobacco addiction in their wild and impetuous youth live with a lifelong addiction. And they live with consequences that are often deadly and heartbreaking to their families. And I will tell you, I lost a great aunt to tobacco. I've lost many families to diseases related to tobacco, but this one was particularly heartbreaking because at her funeral, she requested that her daughter implore the attendees at her funeral to make sure that people did not start smoking, and if they had started, to quit, because of the way that she suffered in her life. And she got addicted before the science was all in. She got addicted before the proof was there on the cancer. She got addicted when celebrities were advertising the products, when doctors were saying, hey, maybe there's a safe alternative with a light cigarette. We know that those are all false claims put forward by the tobacco companies. And it is as responsible legislators and leaders of our state, at the very least, when we pass this excellent compromise, we can move forward in a thoughtful way, and we can move forward without telling the kids of this state that these products are safe. So I thank the members of the conference committee who debated this, who came forward with a thoughtful compromise. It certainly isn't as far as I was hoping to go with this bill, but Minnesota is putting itself on the map once again as a leader in health, and that's something we should all be proud of.
Representative Zellers, for what purpose do you rise?
Privilege of the House, Madam Speaker.
Please state your privilege of the House.
Madam Speaker and members, I would like to introduce you all to not the 15-pound baby that I announced tonight on the House floor, but the 5-pound baby. This is Bennett Hance, his middle name's named after his Uncle Hance, who sadly was taken from us when he was just a senior in high school and didn't have the chance to see his little nephew. But this little guy is named after him, and as we're in the final days of session, I thought it was pretty good timing to bring down my other little girl, who in my second year down here, I held like this, and now as you can see, she's gotten a little bit taller. But it's a privilege, not only of the House, but a privilege to be here. All the stuff that we do down here is critically important, but I hope all of you would agree that if it was taken away tomorrow, if everything that we did down here was lost, at the end of the day, I have these two beautiful little ones and now this baby. But more importantly, and absolutely the light of my life, is my wife Kim, who without her none of this would have been possible. We've been through some pretty tough times to bring these three beautiful angels into the world, and none of that would have been possible without her. I love you, honey. Thank you so much. Members, I introduce you to Bennett Hance, also known as Baby Ben.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Kahn.
Madam Speaker and members, again I want to commend Representative Liebling on a super bill. Like Representative Halverson, I also wish it had gone a little further on e-cigarettes, but let me add a few other, and of course she had such a terrific factual discourse on it, there's hardly anything to add. But let me correct a few misapprehensions from statements that were made. Representative Abler, you may speak in any, you may vape if you want to in any bar, except you can't if it's in Mankato or Duluth, because Mankato have specifically, and Duluth have both, by unanimous votes of their city councils, essentially moved e-cigarettes into the complete control of the Minnesota Clean Indoor Air Act, which was what we wanted. So that's the problem about not doing it on a statewide basis. You've got to be careful of what the boundaries are, what city you're in, and so forth. I'm hoping that my own city of Minneapolis, which is considering it, will also follow in that direction. The Spirit Mountain one, we think we can answer. That's a state-owned authority, so it's covered by the state ownership, but it's also in Proctor, which has been annexed to Duluth, which is covered by the laws, by the ordinance of Duluth, which has also banned e-cigarettes. So we are now leaving it to a local jurisdiction level, and it will be confusing, but I think since the evidence has shown, surveys have shown that 79% of the people in the state believe it should be covered under, vaping should be covered under the Minnesota Clean Indoor Air Act, that will happen probably in some future legislative session. It's also interesting, since one of the things that we allowed was we did allow in all of the bills the vaping shops to continue, that after Duluth passed their ban and they're putting it into the Clean Indoor Air Act, 2 new e-cigarette shops opened up. So it doesn't seem to have harmed the business. People understand that the restrictions were not a ban, they just covered them in the same way as cigarettes. And for those of you who are touting the totally unproven health advantages of these, you know there's a path to get health approval. The same path that Nicorette got, that the nicotine patches got, and so forth. You go through the standard FDA policy and get them approved, and I don't think there's anyone of any authority who's believing that they will be approved as a health supplement, and that's probably why the manufacturers have not tried that route. So thank you, Representative Liebling. Thank you, Representative Halverson, and we have a good start and we'll continue with it.
Any further discussion on the conference committee report? The member from Washington, Representative Detmer.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just found my answer, and would the author of the bill yield for a question?
She will yield. Representative Detmer.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And Representative Liebling, my question is, in our 5 veterans' homes, are our veterans allowed to use the e-cigarettes?
Representative Liebling.
What's that?
Madam Speaker, Representative Detmer, I think I may not be the best person to answer that question. I think Representative Halverson may have the answer, if it would be okay if we would allow her to take that one.
Representative Detmer requests Representative Halverson to yield. She will yield. Representative Halverson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and Representative Detmer, and I'm going to fly a little bit by the seat of my pants, but we made it very clear in this legislation that any current exemptions that exist in the Minnesota Clean Indoor Air Act also exist as part of this e-cigarette legislation. And so any exemptions that exist in Veterans Home, and I believe that there is one specifically in Washington County that was exempted, that continues to exist. I guess it's a veterans camp. Thank you.
Representative Detmer.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Representative. And yes, there is a disabled veterans camp that is exempt. I guess my question, though, would be our veterans' homes, because I was on the other side. I'm still waiting for a call from Department of Veterans Affairs, but I was under the understanding that the veterans' homes did have a smoking area. But I'm still waiting from a call from the veterans' homes. And they're going to be calling me back in just the next couple of minutes.
Any further discussion to the bill? The member from Anoka, Representative Newton.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And Representative Detmer, as you know, in the veterans' homes they have an enclosed area where they can smoke and they're observed. So veterans' homes come under state purview. They're not federal organizations. So I would assume, given this bill, that they wouldn't be permitted to use the e-cigarettes in the veterans' home.
Representative Detmer.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you for that information. But I would hope that that if they've had a exempt from our smoking ban in the past, that they've had an area in the veterans' homes, that they would then be allowed to use the e-cigarettes in the veterans' home along with their cigarettes. So I would hope that that would be the case.
Any further discussion to the bill? Representative Liebling.
All right. Well, thank you, members, and thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, members, for this conversation. And I'm really pleased that we adopted the report without too much difficulty. I reiterate that this is a bill that will improve health, and it will certainly save lives as well. And this kind of a bill was the product of a number of members. As I said when I brought it to the floor the first time, I'd like to thank all of the members who have legislation in here who worked on this, especially our committee that worked extraordinarily hard to put together this legislation in a very short period of time, and in particular to all of our staff, the revisor's office, our partisan and nonpartisan staff who worked very, very hard on all of this, and I will appreciate your green vote.
Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll on the bill. The clerk will close the roll. There being 93 ayes and 35 nays, the bill is repassed as amended by conference and its title agreed to. Calendar for the day. Next bill on the calendar for the day is Senate File 17. The clerk will report the bill.
Senate File 17, the first engrossment, a resolution memorializing Congress.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Dehn.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. Senate File 17 is in some ways a simple bill, but it's also really complex. The resolution actually is written so that we meet our obligation of Article 5 of the U.S. Constitution, and that is when states believe that Congress hasn't acted in a way that we believe that they should act, it's up to us and our responsibility if two-thirds of the state move to Congress to put forward an amendment. And what this resolution does is it actually requests that Congress put forward an amendment that would, in essence, overturn Citizens United. And there's a lot of, I think, somewhat confusion and misunderstanding what Citizens United did. There are a lot of individuals that believe that it totally opened up, campaigns and expenditures, to the wild, wild west, and anybody could do whatever they wanted to. And that's really not what it did. What the ruling did was it removed a previous ban on corporations and organizational use of their main treasury funds for direct advocacy. And for those of you at home listening, that's an independent expenditure. And what it did is it released that sort of prohibition that they had. And I think for many folks, the question of money in speech is a really, really critical question. There are many people that believe that what Citizens United did was said that money is free speech and that any money should be used anywhere. And again, Citizens United didn't totally take the lid off that. There's still prohibition for direct contributions of corporations to campaigns and individuals, as well as international contributions and a few other things. So I was really excited that today we were going to have a conversation about elections, money, and what we as individuals and lawmakers, what role we play in determining what that looks like moving forward. And the impact that the influence of independent expenditures can mean to our campaigns. I was really, really excited, really hoping that we could have a good debate here on the floor about what that was. Now, as we look at many of the amendments, it became real clear to me that the discussion today was not going to be about money in elections. It was going to be about other issues that were well beyond the scope of that. And to be quite honest, I think that some of the amendments were just plain caustic and intended not to have that conversation. So with that, Madam Speaker, I regretfully request that Senate File 17 be returned to the General Register.
Representative Dehn moves that Senate File 17 be resent to the General Register. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, please say no. The motion prevails. The bill will be re-referred to the General Register. Representative Nornis, for what purpose do you rise?
Point of personal privilege, please.
Please state your point of personal privilege.
Madam Speaker and members, well, we have a little lull in the action here. I just wanted to, first of all, set up, there's going to be a little special event tomorrow. This is a special week for Norwegians. So I won't tell you more until tomorrow, but just beware that all of you that are or would like to be Norwegians, tomorrow will be a special day in anticipation of Saturday, which is actually sitting to my day. But anyway, the reason I bring it up, a local television station has done a survey within the last week or two to find the best omelet in the state of Minnesota. And just coincidentally, because it's the Norwegian week, the Viking Cafe in Fergus Falls has been selected as the best restaurant with the best omelet in the state of Minnesota, and will be featured tonight on one of the channels in the Twin Cities at 10 o'clock. So if you see me missing at 10 o'clock, I'll be in the back room here watching to see how they highlight that little cafe back in my hometown. So I just wanted you all to know that and be ready tomorrow for a real fun day. Thank you very much.
The member from Beltrami, Representative Purcell.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We take a moment here. We usually do a Memorial Day remembrance on the House floor, and we've tried to organize that this year, and with the help of my veteran colleagues and my Blue Star mom, Representative Lomer, and Sons of American Legion, Representative John Ward. We're gonna do a reading here from Field. We used to do that. Sorry. And then last year, you may recall, we did Soldier's Last Letter. And just a couple of words, I'll try and be as brief as I can. Probably know more about Flanders Field poem than maybe what you want to know, but it comes out of World War I and was inspired by a fellow, Colonel John McCrae, and after the passing of a good friend and fellow soldier. And what came out of that too was from the word use of poppy in that poem. That's how we started using the poppy as a remembrance for veterans and memorials, etc. So that's what come out of there, and it's just a good poem for the day. And then the other one, that Soldier's Last Letter, I introduced this last year. Just something that I remember saying. I'm an old country music fan, and this is off of George Jones' gospel CD that I have. And if you ever really want to get your tears jerked out of your eye, listen to him sing that, because it's hard to do it justice reading it. But this was written 1941 by Red Stewart. He was in Pearl Harbor and saw some of his buds go down, and so he sat down, he penned this thing, and then some years later, about 1944, Ernest Tubb recorded it, and so it gained some notoriety from that point on. One other thing I want to say as we move forward here, and I'm going to read, we're going to do this a little different. We aren't going to yield from one to one. We're just going to try and read these things. Maybe make them sound a little better. So I'm going to read off who's going to be participating, and then we're going to start it up here in a minute. So we've got Representative Cornish, Representative Howell, Representative Detmer, Representative Earhart, Representative Gunther. Sorry about this. Representative Lesch, Representative Lomer, Representative Murphy M., our chair of our Veterans Committee, Representative Newton, Representative John Ward. Yeah, and I just want to say one other thing, and then I'm gonna sit and listen. Just by serendipity, Tuesday night, I think it was the 13th. I don't watch much TV, but I was watching public TV for whatever reason I was watching, and there was a show on there called Coming Back. A fellow named Moore, Iraq veteran, and there's a couple more episodes of that coming at you, and I urge you, I challenge you, every one of you, to watch that. It tells a story that you've never probably seen told if you haven't been there and done that, and it's a good understanding. So with that, Representative Cornish.
In Flanders fields the poppies blow, between the crosses row on row.
That mark our place, and in the sky the larks still bravely singing fly.
Scars heard amid the guns below, we are the dead, short days ago. We lived, felt dawn, saw sunset glow.
Loved and we were loved, and now we lie in Flanders field. Take up our quarrel with the foe. To you from failing hands we throw the torch. Be yours to hold it high.
If ye break faith with us who die, we shall not sleep, though poppies grow in Flanders field.
Soldier's last letter. When the postman delivered a letter, it filled her heart, dear heart, full of joy. But she didn't know till she read the inside. It was the last one from her darling boy.
Dear Mom was the way that it started. I miss you so much, it went on. Mom, I didn't know that I loved you so, but I'll prove it when this war is won.
I'm writing this down in a trench, Mom. Don't scold me if it isn't so neat. You know, as you did when I was a kid, and I'd come home with mud on my feet.
The captain just gave us our orders, and Mom, we will carry them through. I'll finish this letter the first chance I get, but now I'll just say I love you.
Then the mother's old hands began to tremble, and she fought against tears in her eyes. But they came unashamed, for there was no name, and she knew that her darling had died.
That night, as she knelt by her bedside, she prayed, Lord above, hear my plea, and protect all the sons that are fighting tonight. And dear God, keep America free.
Members, please stand in a moment of silence for those who have given their life for our country. Representative Purcell.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And Madam Speaker, I'd move a recess to call the chair about an hour, I expect.
Representative Purcell moves a recess to the call of the chair. All those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, please say no. The motion prevails. The House stands in recess to the call of the chair.